Hi, everyone. I think we are ready to continue, and I'm very excited to invite to the stage incredible individuals for the panel who's going to talk about shaping a new era of Indigenous storytelling. And I would like to welcome on stage our moderator, Gary Goldberger. Then the panel is joined by Jonah Gaynor, the producer of FableVision Studios. Sorry, Gary, I didn't give you the title introduction. Gary is the president of FableVision Studios. Okay, also we do have Jane Lee, the director of production from iThrive Games. And the last but not the least, we've got John Ristevski, the CEO from CyArk. Okay, Gary, over to you.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. As we said, we're going to share about our experiences doing co-design. So a lot of panels that you're seeing are kind of about the end product, and what we want to talk about is the beginning of the product and projects, and how this group goes about doing that, and how they integrate authentic voices into it. So we're going to do quick introductions. You already heard I'm Gary Goldberger, but can you just do like a 1 minute who you are and what you've been doing?
Sure. Want me to start? Oh, yeah. Okay. My name is John Ristevski. I'm with CyArk.
Sorry about that.
No, don't worry.
Jeez, that was so loud.
We're a 501c3 nonprofit based in the San Francisco Bay Area. Our mission is to engage new audiences with stories of cultural heritage, so real places, real people. We've been working at this for about 24 years, and our kind of origin story is really around 3D documentation of cultural heritage, so creating photorealistic and accurate representations. And I think in the last 5 to 7 years, we've been really leaning into the storytelling. So using the 3D data as a canvas to overlay narrative and interaction and stories and engage the public with those stories as well.
Great, I'll go next. I'm Jane Lee. I'm the director of production at iThrive Games. We develop social and emotional learning experiences for teens. And the way we do that is we always do co-design with teens before we begin. So that's what I'm probably going to talk about a little today.
And I'm Jonah Gaynor. I'm a producer at FableVision Studios. We're a learning media company in not very sunny Boston, Massachusetts, sometimes sunny. We do all sorts of different media to try to help learners achieve their dreams and become their best selves. And we have partnered with both iThrive and CyArk, and we'll be talking about some lessons learned today.
Excellent, thank you so much. We have a fourth panelist who was supposed to be here, Phyllis Wimberly. Unfortunately, she couldn't come. She's our partner up in Alaska working for the Chukachimute Foundation, but she sent a video, so here we go. We're going to need 1 minute. So just to let you know how we're going to run this panel, we're going to kind of just talk about, share some of the projects work that we've been doing over the past couple of years. We're going to then just have open conversation. Hopefully, we're not going to do questions at the end. So if you are interested in kind of like joining the conversation, please just raise your hand. I'll call on you, and we can kind of keep it open once we start getting started. And was that enough time? You want me to keep going? I can keep going.
Honored to share our work on this games. Hi, I'm Phyllis Wimberly, Deputy Director at Chukachimute. I'm honored to share our work on this Games for Change panel about Nunaka, which means my village, where language comes to play. In the Chukach region, we're dealing with the rapid loss of our languages. Today, very few children have chances to hear their native language, Sugt'stun, in real life. That's where the internet can come in handy. We can share our elders' voices online by creating a fun, engaging video game. With the Nunaka, children can hear Sugt'stun words and songs. They visit places inspired by the Chugach region. They take part in traditional activities like berry picking, fishing, and kayaking. We also wanted to make sure they can learn their language in a fun way. No worksheets, no tests, just a place where they can explore and listen to recordings of elders. But I want you to know, language proficiency is still a big part of our goals in our Head Start program. Every part of this game was planned and developed by our communities. When the game was first made, we had an elder circle that would plan the elements. They worked closely with our producer, FableVision, to create cultural activities and to help us to record the audio portions in Sugt'stun. Then during the game's expansion last summer, our development team also partnered with iThrive Studios to bring our region's youth into the game as developers. The youth created the mini games, avatars, and locations for the expansion. Having the youth participate strengthened the game, making it more representative of our area and truly reflective of village life. Reaching the students remotely came with real obstacles. We not only had to keep students engaged, but also deal with weather delays, internet access, and getting supplies to events. But it was always worth it because it's an opportunity to come back together and celebrate our communities. We don't charge people to play the game, so we have to fund these expansions through private and government grants. In closing, we are deeply grateful to the U.S. Department of Education for funding this project. We also want to express our gratitude to the communities in the Chugach region, the great teams at the Head Start program, the Department of Education, FableVision Studios, and iThrive Games. Most of all, we hope Nunaka helps children learn, play, and feel proud of who they are. This is what the game's tagline, "Where language comes to play," means to us. Thank you for having me today.
Close this so I could see this side of the crowd. So that was Phyllis. She was really the head of the Nunaka project. She was the visionary and really kind of like got the funding and brought us all together, which you'll hear a little bit more about this project. Do you want to go in a little bit deeper into some of the work that you've been working on for the past couple of years?
Yeah, so at CyArk, we work with both Indigenous communities here in the United States, but also around the world. Not purely with Indigenous communities, but it ends up being a pretty significant portion of our work. I got to work with FableVision on a project called Resonant, which we launched last year, I think. Yeah, after 6 years of development. It started off with an NEH Digital Projects for the Public prototyping grant. And so we prototyped a kind of single-level playable demo back in 2020, I think that was launched. And then we were able to successfully get the next round of funding for the production grant, I think in 2021 or 2022, and released it in 2025. And a big part of the Resonant project and the focus of the project was our core partner, which was the Hopi tribe, and looking at 2 sites connected to the Hopi traditions, one at Mesa Verde, Balcony House, if you've been there, it's a pretty spectacular cliff dwelling, and the other one at Wapatki in Arizona, a very different type of site, but 2 that were very connected to the Hopi people and the ancestral Pueblo people. Although there were many, many communities that had connections to this, we chose to work just with the Hopi. It was almost an impossible task to have some representative experience and proper consultation and co-design with more than one tribe. So what we ended up with for Resonant was an experience that really tells the Hopi story at Balcony House and at Mesa Verde. And maybe I'll let Jonah talk a little bit more about the game dynamics of Resonant.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about the co-design process. I mean, co-design is really, I mean, you're at a panel about co-design, but we all are very much believers in it. I think a lot because we are working a lot with communities that are not necessarily deep in our industry, deep in games. They don't have as much experience as a 15-year-old might. A lot of the times we're working with the real knowledge holders in these communities who are, 60s, 70s, 80s, even 90s at times. And so using sort of co-design principles, you can really understand how to tell an authentic story with them, how to have them work within games that they might not be particularly familiar with or environments that are new, but get something that is really deeply authentic and have that be passed down to younger generations who are more familiar with our medium. So the Resonant project, we worked a lot with several, actually dozens really, of people very knowledgeable about the Hopi tribe past and present. Had a lot of interesting conversations about, do we want this to be a representation of what the Hopi tribe used to look like and that a lot of people are trying to preserve, or do we want it to be a representation of what we're looking at today? And then I'm going to pivot because then I'm going to pass it to Jane. And then in 2022, we started working with Phyllis and the folks at Chugachmute on a language and culture learning game for the Sugpiaq people, which is southern Alaska, if anybody knows geography, like Anchorage, go due south. And we started working with a big group of elders there who really have a lot of knowledge about their culture and language. And then there's a big gap that we were trying to fill. And then there's these young kids that are really just starting to learn about the world around them. And they're playing games as a way to get familiar with how the world works. And so we worked with them on making a product for preschoolers that really sort of hit those goals and made people proud of their culture. And then
where you're going with that?
Yeah, my bad. We didn't
prep. And then we got to work with students last year on developing this game further. So iThrive came in to work with students on the co-design experience. What was really interesting is we started out remotely, which was incredibly difficult. Always sort of like tech issues. It can be really challenging to work with people remotely. Time differences and sort of, there was one co-design session I remember where we just couldn't see them, but they could see us. They couldn't figure out how to turn on their camera, and we were like, this is no way to do this work because so much of the work is about relationships, right? And so the work really opened up when we were able to go to these regions in Alaska, which I have to say, I had never been to Alaska, and if you have an opportunity to go, you should go because it was just stunning. But really what was cool about the experience was it became so intergenerational. The work that I do with students usually is reserved to sort of teens, preteens. This work got to be so intergenerational because it was really the whole village coming together to participate in the process, and that really influenced the eventual game. And also another cool thing about this project is that it's really for a niche area. This language is only spoken in this region, and so we could be really specific, which was really fun.
Yeah, so the teens got involved in the co-design of the second release of the game. So we had a bunch of mini games, and then there was a co-design process where they kind of thought about what they wanted to kind of like share with the younger generation, and worked with the elders to kind of like learn about the language. And so as you were leading the co-design process, where did you find your successes in that? Was it because you were live that it was effective, or were there certain tools that you were able to use that?
Yeah, I think one thing I will say as a facilitator who does co-design a lot is you really can't rush the process. you might get nothing done the first couple of days, which always feels a little like, oh, I'm starting to get nervous. And I think as a facilitator, you just have to trust the process and really know that building the relationships and prioritizing that connection over getting to where you need to be is more important. And so we played games with them, we went on hikes with them, which I actually found that just going on the hikes with them really taught me so much about this culture and the types of games that they wanted to create. And so we started talking about what was your favorite childhood memory, tell me about an activity that you did with your family, and then we were really able to bring those into the game so that when we started to play with remixing sort of the existing mechanics of the game or coming up with new ones, they had a really good understanding of what they wanted to create and what was important to them.
I was going to echo that in terms of like not rushing these projects. They're going to take a lot longer than a typical project, and that just needs to be embedded in the plan from the very beginning. I think developing trust is super, super important. I think our most successful projects with our Indigenous community partners have been ones where we've developed that relationship over years and years. And then we encounter another project with them, and then I think then we can it really blossoms at that point, because I think that the trust is already there. Because they're entrusting us with their stories and their cultural heritage and entrusting us to help present it to the world. And I think that's a pretty vulnerable and special thing, and I think that trust has to be built. And you're not going to walk in day one and get it.
And I think that we all say we're not going to go in with preconceived notions about things. We're going to learn from square one. But really, I think over and over again, we've sort of learned to even take a step further back from that, especially even with Nunaka, sort of figuring out how does storytelling work culturally here. It might be different from what we're assuming, from what we had planned in our head for what this game was going to look like. Oh, it's going to be a big open world adventure where you'll encounter different stories sort of naturally, and sort of learning over months, honestly, that the way of relaying stories and thinking about culture was different enough that it actually changed a lot of our core game design principles. And so in terms of just purely an exercise in game design, if you're a purist, it's beautiful because you really get to like think about your art form from complete base principles and build it up in an authentic way.
Yeah, it's making me think of while we were in the villages, they use ATVs to get around a lot, or Hondas. And we had originally conceived a game that was going to be a racing game where you would race ATVs. What we discovered when we were talking to the students and the adults there was, we actually use the ATVs to help each other. We're a community. We use these ATVs to deliver each other food, bring each other resources. And so then we changed the game completely to be about delivering goods and supplies and helping out your community.
Yeah, so when you're going through the co-design process, where do you find yourself being able to pivot, and where do you feel like you can't pivot? Or do you have preconceived notions when you're kind of like starting that process?
I mean, I think creativity always needs constraints. You need a box to hold things. And so I think it's about setting up those expectations early. We would say with the students, well, we can't make like a brand new VR game, and a couple of them were like, can we make it like Fortnite? And I said, no, that's not going to happen.
Yeah. There was a lot of requests for Fortnite. It was really interesting. Weird.
Also, I had to remind them this game is for young kids who are learning language, so it's not going to work for them. So really always just saying like, this is the box of ingredients that we have to play with, and everything else you can come up with.
Yeah, it's also kind of interesting because through the process, you saw certain students kind of gravitate towards their own skills, right? And so they brought kind of like more to themselves than just what you expected, it seemed like, as well, right? They were like, oh, I want to do animation. We were like, oh, well, so okay, let us talk about animation. And like, I felt like we had a plan, but it really changed based upon the group and individual that was there. And I think when you're talking about planning, it's hard to kind of like put that in, to quantify that. And it's hard to be like, oh, this is how much time we definitely need. Oh, we need 3 weeks and that's it, and then we're gonna have our co-design process and we're done, right? So like, how do you pre-plan in your organization? How do you do that?
I think like a lot of it's non-linear. There's a lot of recursive, iterative work,
Yeah.
and to refine the story and refine the ingredients, and we pad it out.
Yeah.
That's like, we just know how long these projects will take, and we pad it out, and we have a process which may get revised or reset at the very beginning, and that's okay too. We also start with a set of ingredients that we present and say, what can we make from this? And this is the realm of possibility. But even then, it can be turned upside down a little bit.
Yeah. So as you're kind of like working with funders, I know this is kind of a little bit of a change. Like, as you're working with funders, how do you prepare them for that process? And how do you prepare them for being like, listen, we might get to the end of the 3 months and not know where we're going yet?
I think generally with our funders, which might be government grants, it could be foundations, I think usually the time is easy to pad, and time doesn't necessarily mean money all the time for us.
Yeah.
Like, because we may, at
Right.
CyArk, we may have 6 or 7 projects going on at one time. If this one stalls for 2 months because it needs more time to settle or needs more consultation time, it's okay. Like, we can usually pad it out in terms of time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Jonah, you were such a good producer on this game. Thank God for you. Because I feel like you would start it, you knew what type of work to begin and what type of work to wait for. You were really good at that.
This was a huge learning process, and over several years of sort of instinctually understanding, how to set up the game production process in a way that is going to ensure that by the end of it, you have something authentic that everybody's proud of, as opposed to something that is big and done and fast. I think back a lot to like way at the beginning when we were sort of learning, what makes for Nunaka a Sugpiaq community really, what are activities that they really do a lot? What is something that we can present in a game to a preschooler that they would understand? And they're like, oh, eating ice cream. And we're like, yeah, eat ice cream at the beach. And they're like, no. And for several weeks, we said, that was a weird interaction. I don't really understand what that was about. Sort of go forward, making an ice cream game. Yeah, like pull a truck up.
And,
chocolate vanilla swirl.
Yep.
Yeah.
Everybody
It took us several weeks to realize that we actually had a misunderstanding about what ice cream meant, because for us, it's a delicious treat. And then for them, they said, oh, no, our ice cream is made with seal fat, and then you mix it with berries, and it is a dessert that only adults like. Children do not like it. And so we said, oh, so you don't eat it on the beach. And they're like, nobody really goes to the beach to hang out either. It's like rocky, it cuts you up. We were like, oh yeah. I really think that even, you really had to take a step back and be like, yeah, I kind of got to question a lot of what I'm hearing to make sure we're on the same page. So it takes a lot of trial and, unfortunately, a chunk of error as well.
Yeah, I mean, to the point, like going there and being there changed our perspective, right? So being present did a few things, right? One, we understood their ice cream dilemma and their beach dilemma, but
among
also
other things.
Yeah, amongst other things. But I think it also kind of built trust, right? They said, oh, you're the first people to come and actually kind of like sit and talk with us and kind of help figure this out. So I think, through the co-design process, you have to put that in your timeline as well, right? I mean, I know your team like is on the ground often and are there with people, and so how do you kind of like build out those relationships typically?
Yeah, rare for us to do something fully remote. Like, usually we need to be there to do the 3D documentation, which often involves training and capacity building, so sharing some of that equipment and some of those skills with the local teams as well, and making enough time on the ground too, not just to do work, but to listen, to drink, to eat, share stories. I think that's where the magic happens on most of our projects, where the bonds are formed and people come back from my team and they're super psyched about the relationship and what they've heard and what they've experienced. And I think our local partners are also energized by it too, but it requires real people on the ground and enough time to form those relationships.
Something that we heard a lot talking to Hopi folks was, oh yeah, well, a lot of people come in here and they're very interested in our culture for one meeting, and then they leave and they say, I think I kind of get it. And so I'm forgetting who it was. It might have been Colleen Lucero, said, yeah, it's crazy. When you Google image search Hopi art, most of it is Hopi, but like a chunk of it isn't. It's just vaguely Southwestern American indigenous, which was really frustrating because these are distinct cultures and these are distinct groups of people that want to have their culture represented and not be lumped together as a monolith, basically.
That's a good point. I think maybe how it differs from other projects, you can't do that real archival research. We do that on some, we read and we research and we look up what is out there. And I think with our Indigenous partners, a lot of it is oral traditions and stories that they hold close. A lot of the information out there is not accurate if it is on the web. The real story is there from the people, not something you can research online.
Yeah, and they were also very protective of their knowledge. I think you were kind of mentioning this. And when we were kind of like talking about, well, is this for the Hopi people or is this for the general community? They're like, oh, well, this is how we would talk if we were talking to our community, but here's how we would talk if we're doing general public. And basically they said, oh, we're going to tell our culture as if they're children, right? As if we're children as the general population. Because there's certain things that are held so near and dear that has either been stolen or taken out of their community that they've been very protective of. And I think kind of like having open and honest conversations early with the communities and figuring out what feels right and what feels appropriate. And again, you're dealing with community experts, community leaders, you're working with tribal bureaucracy, multiple tribes coming together. So it actually becomes very complicated and there isn't one voice. So you have to make sure that there's open dialogue within multiple levels of the community, which is also something that was eye-opening to me, So now, how about challenges that you guys have seen through the co-design process, where you unexpected pitfalls? Anything that you want to share there? Things not to do for these people who might be doing co-design?
I mean, I think a couple things we've already talked about, which is like, just give yourself lots of time, don't rush the process, try and get to that community in person. That's gonna definitely make things go a lot faster. I think also, just understanding that you are working with a different culture. There were co-design activities that we do with lots of students where, just by the nature of a lot of the work I do, sometimes you're working with students who are being asked to speak all the time. And these students aren't necessarily being asked to speak all the time. And so some of the activities, it took them a little bit of time to warm up and sort of understand, like, oh, you want an open-ended answer for me. So I think what we ended up doing was sort of making things a little more closed too. Like, can you respond with, like, using, give me, how are you feeling about this? Is this 4 out of 5 or is this a 0 out of 5? Like, how are you feeling? Sort of asking more close-ended stuff in the beginning to get them comfortable with contributing in a way where they didn't feel judged.
Yeah, I mean, you also had the challenge of working with teenagers.
But I always worked with teenagers, so.
Having them be able to share within their own group seemed like it was a difficult task in the beginning.
Yeah.
And then it seemed like you were able to do small group activities, and that seemed to kind of like break a couple of things. You also did like large group activities where nobody was doing anything. They were like, oh, we're not kind of.
It was much easier to get the students to work in smaller groups, to contribute in smaller groups, and that's why like the hikes were also so good, because sometimes you just end up hanging out with 2 students, talking with them. So yeah, just sort of not expecting, like being in a room like this and expecting you guys to say, oh, I have an idea for a game. That wasn't really happening.
Do you have any challenges
I
that
did,
you want to talk about?
I did with Resonant. I was
Oh,
gonna-
yeah, go ahead.
I think maybe this is not even particular to Indigenous partners because just the VR headsets, it was a VR project on Quest headsets and getting our partners the test builds and getting them to self-install it and test it, keeping those headsets alive and usable. It's just been it's been kind of a nightmare, and it's tough for anyone to manage like 10 headsets and keep it all working. And I think it has not been as fruitful as we wanted it to be if it was in another medium, or we get that great immersive environment in the headset, but actually the practicality of maintaining that, and especially with the Hopi, it was on a mobile public library as well, so it was kind of a dynamic environment and did not quite work the way we hoped, I think.
No, and because they were part of the co-design, they were getting like updates often, and it really was a technological challenge. On the other hand, for the students got computers. So like every child that participated in co-design had tools that they could actually take and go beyond. So which actually was learning. We did that afterwards, and I think it was kind of interesting because like how do we bring more technology and tools to the community that they could use beyond the project was actually really wonderful. The VR devices are just epic. It, like get more and more challenging the older that they get, unfortunately, because of the updates and everything else. And then also, things that we didn't think about were like, oh, everybody needs an account. Right? Everybody needs a Facebook at the time, Facebook account. So that caused its own challenges too.
One major big challenge, I think, was when we're making games about people's culture and their identity that they're very, very deeply tied to. It's very different going to them as a subject matter expert than if you were going to a math PhD who says, yes, this information is coming across correctly. It's a lot easier for that math PhD to understand that from something you write out or something you mock up. But when it is about somebody's culture and their heritage and their identity, it is a lot harder for that to sort of become apparent until it's really out there on paper. And so underscoring a lot of what John and Jane have been saying is leaving yourself time and space to make sure that you are iterating successfully and getting something that is authentic to somebody's experience pays major, major dividends.
I'm gonna bring off a different question. How do you get communities to feel invested beyond just the end product? Do you think about that? Are you like, oh yeah, come be part of this because you'll get X? Or in the beginning of the process, do you guys talk about that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think one of the most powerful things that you get to see is a young person realize people actually wanted to listen to them and that people actually thought their ideas mattered. So I think like getting to see the game, of course, like at the end, the students seeing the games that they created on the device was so powerful. In other work that I do, I've just come off a series of helping some young teens design a new civic square and designing what does like a really youth-led event look like when it's mostly adults who are in the audience. They have just been so excited because they're like, I didn't know that people would actually listen if I had something to say. I didn't realize like I can have more intimate conversations and expect vulnerability from adults if I set up an event in a certain way. So I think I always lead with, you're the expert of your experience. I'm really asking you to show up as a consultant for me. And you get to create something and make something better for someone else. And that is, I think, very motivational.
Yeah, I think you said disregarding the end product, but like thinking about the end product,
Or-
like do they really need the end product? Do they have like it's so much better?
Yes, it's the journey.
Yeah, it's so much better than when they come to us with an idea and be like, hey, we want to build this, or we have this problem, or we want to share this story. If that's the starting point, I think you have a very invested partnership. And it's not always, sometimes these things come up organically, and we might approach them to tell a story, but I think if they have a real need and we can build something that they can use, I think that's the perfect storm for us.
Yeah, and I know like our project, it started before. It started early as an academic, right? And it kind of like was an external story coming in, and then we were like, we have to connect it to funding somehow. So, the environment. Okay, we're gonna talk about environment stories, and then they're like, yeah, that's not what we want to talk about. And so, like, allowing them to know that we were there, to be okay with that, was another thing that was like really interesting, because they weren't even sure if we would be pivoting on what we wanted, you know. And oftentimes we had to keep saying like, no, this is your game, this is your experience, whatever you want to do, we're just kind of like helping, bring it to the world was really important. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, I think we have a microphone. Sorry, I just jumped up on that. There's no extra microphone here. Here, you want to borrow one?
He can project to the back row, right?
Don't worry, I'm loud.
Thank you. A lot of what you guys are talking about has to do with learning in relation with space, physical place, and partnerships in place. How do you preserve the integrity of that in a digital media product? And what do you think about maintaining that aspect of social learning in physical space in your finished product?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think so much of our work at CyArk is place-based, and it starts with this kind of 3D replica snapshot in time, which is the canvas, and then overlaying these stories spatially, I think, and then presenting it in a way that is kind of digestible to an audience on a 2D screen, right? I think there's like multiple layers there. I think there's so much that goes into like building a sense of place, and it's not just the photorealistic environment is just a small part of it. I think it's like ambient audio, it is like the voices of people, it is the stories that we can bring alive visually. I don't know. There's all these elements, I think, go towards it, and hopefully at the end of the day, we're creating some sort of like sense and an experience that kind of cultivates learning as well. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, and for Nunaka, it's a preschool project, so it's done in its ultimate use is in the preschool with communities. It's very rare that one child was playing it by themselves. It was usually 2 or 3 playing together, and because their classrooms are very small, sometimes it was intergenerational play. So kind of like creating in your game design opportunities to have conversation is really important. I think Scott Osterwald said that in the panel about Quandary beforehand, is like, if you give opportunities for conversation, or always think of your game as being a 2-player game, right? And I think that kind of is helpful as well. Is there another question? Yeah.
I was wondering why we didn't show it.
Yeah, I don't. Who is in charge of this panel? Yes. The Nunaka is I'll come up and I'll send you a link, but it's a free game, iPad based, that you can download at any point in time. It's Nunaka with a K, so Nunka. It's on iOS.
AKA, Nunaka.
That's how you spell it. He's the producer. And I don't know.
Resonant is available on the Quest store as well, also for free.
Part of the reason that I didn't show it, to be honest, is I wanted to talk more about the process than the final product. So that's the only reason, just to let you know. Yeah.
I had a question about the design choices that are kind of in the middle between like co-design around picking colors, which is one critique that like we get all together and we end up doing very not influential, to grand narratives. This is the history of our people. Both of those seem in some ways, like I've heard some talk about what you can refine both those, but the middle, especially where it becomes technological, what are the feedback loops? What are the choices when you think about like game design and what game design is about as opposed to storytelling? Is that something where it's like they trust you with some of the game design, or do you try to present, well, here's two different mechanics we could be talking about? What kind of like feedback? So just trying to think about that middle space between the kind of grand and the micro. How did you navigate that with a partner?
Yeah, I think especially about working with teenagers, trying to give a sort of introductory course into like the various parts of what goes into making a game. I mean, games are extremely multidisciplinary, so that everybody's sort of speaking the same language. And then we had like dozens of giant Post-it notes on the board where people writing ideas for things that they feel are culturally important, mechanics that they think are fun, and basically trying to trying to encourage them to sort of make connections. A lot of the time it was us sort of as the game subject matter experts sort of putting things together, but really trying to have them have that initial sort of spark of creativity and of desire to build something, and then sort of supporting that as it went up. So we definitely tried to do like, what is our culture? Do you like this color? But also like, what does this mechanic feel like? How does this interplay with the rest of the game?
I also think it's scaffolding. You know, you start with some of the easy decisions or the things that everyone can agree on, and then you start building. You know, we did a lot of skills training throughout this process because one of the principles of the project was not just to take, but to also give back, right? And so like Jonah gave a great introductory course on Scratch, right?
Shout out MIT.
Yes. And Jonah gave a great, Gary gave a great introductory course on animation. And one of the things we did was we collected sort of like a number of cultural activities that they enjoyed, cultural stories. And then we sort of, an activity that worked really well for me that you guys can use too is like just getting everything on note cards and then asking them to sort of remix things. So like, let's grab one of the learning objectives that we know the Head Start students want, like identifying emotions or counting. Let's grab that, and then let's grab an activity. Okay, how could we maybe make that work? How could we bring some of the characters in from the other game? And they came up with really good ideas. So they were the ones doing the game design ultimately.
Thank you. Okay, it is on. Okay, great. So how do you kind of contend with sometimes differing or even conflicting stories? Like I imagine, especially with teenagers, I bet you there were some strong feelings sometimes, but kind of curious how you navigate that, especially people who maybe don't do this professionally or even at all before this moment. And gender. The gender differences.
I'm very curious. Sorry. We share a brain cell. Sorry, yeah. And just because it's supposed to be for like younger kids, and speaking of no one's a monolith, I'm very interested in how you navigated like gender in teenagers around this game and this process specifically, just because it's representing a whole culture. It's in the hands of teenagers.
You got another 45 minutes? Yeah, there is a lot of interesting things like Nunaka and CyArk. Or in Resonant, you are first person. It is you in there. In Nunaka, you are playing sort of a version of yourself. We had intentionally kind of stripped away gender from it, but like there are a lot of traditions that date back hundreds, if not thousands of years that are very sort of gender defined. Like, oh, that piece of that headdress is like only worn by women. And so I think the answer was we wanted to make sure we weren't removing experiences from people based on, choices that they made in the game or how they presented themselves in the game. But yeah, I think that's an ongoing sort of question of how do you represent everybody and everybody's slightly differing experiences within their own lived experience. I don't think there's a single answer, but
Well, I'll add to, we had a weekly call with a group of elders that were really generous with their ideas, and they also know that it's subjective, right? They would say like, oh, I forget that word, you'd have to ask old Richard, and it is a community where even the students would say like, oh, you have to ask Richard about that. Like, they sort of know some people hold the histories differently. It felt like there was always room for that.
and then you would ask Richard, and he'd be like, "I have no idea what you're talking about."
That's true. Always ask Richard. Thank you very much. Thank you for engaging in the conversation. We'll be around for the next couple minutes, but they've asked us to stop on time. So thank you very much. Big hand.
Thank you very much, our dear panelists. We're going to take a short break now, and our sessions we will resume at 4.